Kia ora koutou. I'm Ishbel and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. I'm very, very pleased to announce Lisa Chisholm and Mandy Phipps-Green, our colleagues from the Otago University, who are going to be giving a short, well, maybe not short, but incredibly dense and interesting discussion about the advancing the University of Otago research landscape, moving the new institutional repository from point A to point B. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we can address those at the end of the session. But in the meantime, I will leave the floor to Mandy and Lisa.
Thank you, to everybody. So I'm Lisa, the Research Services Manager, and this is Mandy. We are part of the Ōtākou Whakaihu Waka team here at University of Otago. We're just going to
try and work out how to share
our screen because the technology worked the other day and it's not working now.
I thought I just went share content, but
let's see.
Can we do it just from there? No. Well, I've got to pick something. Is it my desktop? Plug HDMI cable, use the share. Sorry, guys, we should have tested this before, but I might just have to grab someone. Sorry.
We work in an open plan office and we decided that we'd go down to our e-conferencing room and not host it in our open plan office, and maybe that was the wrong choice.
I showed everyone my email trying to share my screen before, so I think you're doing better.
Hi, Jeff.
What are we doing wrong, Jeff?
That's all right. Hi, folks. So what we can do on here is we're just going to that guy just as a quick one. It comes up. Let's just do that share screen.
Oh, that way. Okay.
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
This was Jeff, ladies and gentlemen.
Right, crisis averted. So yes, we're going to start talk to you today about our journey of changing our institutional repository from DSpace to Esploro. And we've got a few slides. We're going to take turns, and we're hoping that will be about half an hour worth of us talking, and then we'll have some time for questions if people are interested. So why did we decide to implement a new platform? So you'll be horrified to hear that Otago was on DSpace 5 up until last year. So we were stuck on DSpace 5 for quite a long time. Our Otago developers were non-existent. We couldn't make changes, we couldn't upgrade to the latest versions of DSpace. We lost our DSpace experts here at Otago. It was clunky, very manual heavy. DSpace 5 very, very manual orientated and very bespoke. So Otago likes to make things specific to us, and so it was very bespoke. And in the end, it actually started to pose a security risk. So it came on our IT security roadmap as a proposed risk. And so basically it was no longer fit for purpose. So also we discovered along the way too that a lot of our Otago staff were not actually engaging at all with our archive. Mandy will talk a bit about this later. So we had very few publications added by them. The most recent growth for our archive in the last few years was actually due to a mandatory deposit decision that was made in 2020, where all students, masters and PhD students, are instructed to place their theses into our institutional repository. So that had a wee bit of a spike in our research outputs in there, and also collections that are created by our admin staff like Mandy. So we've actually created specific collections and brought in a lot of research outputs that way. So not really utilised by our researchers, which is what we really wanted. Leading on from the above, also, we had no interoperability with other systems. So we have a research outputs database, which is our PBRF database, and a separate grants database. So all separate systems, they didn't talk to each other at all. So our researchers and admin staff are having to put research outputs and details about our research into multiple different systems. So obviously a duplicated effort for researchers and library research office staff. And again, that was a major contributor to the academics actually not engaging with our archive at all, because it was just another place to have to put their research and remember to put their research. Obviously the new MB open research policy was a consideration, and other funder requirements now having to make things open, so that we're starting to become a little bit more front and centre for the library and researchers, wanting to make sure that our institutional repository was visible and findable, and we had content in there. Otago was obviously looking at rankings, so wanting to improve the rankings, so making our research again more visible and accessible. In response to the University of New Zealand PAN statement, trying to get as much content open access as possible. And part of this project, during the proposal phase, previous colleagues discovered that actually only 2% of the eligible journal articles from Otago researchers were actually in our archive. So we had some really low statistics there. So 2% was pretty horrifying for most people. So helpful to get the proposal across the line, but not so helpful for us. So the timeline. So this project kicked off in around 2021 with a project proposal. This was prior to Mandy and I starting in the RSU, so we inherited a very large but a very exciting project. Once the project was approved, the official team, project team was set up. The project was actually sponsored by our DVC of Research, which was great, and our university librarian, Mike Wall, was the business owner for the project. So around March, April 2023, we went out and asked for proposals, so the official RFP process. So we asked for bids for various vendors. And then after a very rigorous process, including library staff, academics, graduate research schools, so it wasn't just a library decision. We reached a decision on a system. So May, we decided what platform, what product we were choosing, but actually the contract wasn't signed until September. So I went through again another very rigorous process, which involved legal advice, contract experts, and a cybersecurity framework checks, among other things. So there was quite a big gap. We got all excited about having a new system, in May, and then nothing really sort of happened until September. And so once it was signed, it kicked off rapidly. So September, once that was passed, October and November really started the planning implementation phase. So yeah, it kind of kick-started with a hiss and a roar, and we went straight into focusing on how we can migrate our content out of DSpace and into Esploro. And then we actually managed to meet our target. So the 1st of May, we went live, a very sort of quiet live date. And we did this to avoid the thesis flurry. We get a flurry of deposits around the graduation, so we timed it after that, so we didn't have to worry about that. So this is what it looks like, and there's a link there if anybody's interested in looking at our archive. So this is our new interface. So it is a Ex Libris Clarivate product. We also have Alma Primo as a library catalogue, and we actually just recently implemented Rosetta, the digital preservation system, as well. So we now have a suite of Ex Libris products, which is good from our perspective, our library systems perspective. It's a similar product, and yeah, it's really helpful because the products are quite similar. We kept the name Our Archive, as we discovered that people didn't quite understand what the our part meant. So our archive is Otago University's research archive. So we did a bit of promo on that, but we decided to keep the name just because it was consistency purposes. So whilst we're the only New Zealand library currently that has Esploro, we know that everybody else is in the DSpace, symplectic space. There are other universities around the world and some colleagues over in Australia that are using this, and this is just a few examples of other universities that and other institutions that are using Esploro as well. So there's a good strong community there. So what did we do? Mandy found this lovely infographic at the top. It is a symbolic of kind of the mindset that we were in a little bit when we were migrating our content. So we was actually the project team. So Mandy and I representing the library, Mandy, our subject matter expert. We had a library systems team. So we've got 3 library systems team that actually sit in the library with us, which is great. We had an IT infrastructure person, we had business analyst, and of course, a very important project manager. So it actually was a proper project. And also we had Melanie, who's the Ex Libris point of contact. So we had a really nice team. We weren't doing it on our own. I just wanted to point out too, like these are just bullet points on a screen, and I'm sure many of you will understand that actually these don't really represent the amount of work that was undertaken in migrating a system. There was so many meetings, so many emails, so many conversations, late nights thinking things, noting things down your phone in the morning, and to not forget things, and so much testing. So even though we're doing a once over lightly, that was a lot of work in a very short space of time, and we had a great team, and we couldn't have done it without them. So whilst we were actually undertaking training on this whole new system, we also had to do quite a lot of work and other tasks to complete. So first off, we obviously kicked off with migrating our existing content. And so with that brought a lot of blood, sweat and tears as well. So we did this in 2 stages. So we had about 15,000 items in our repository already. So that was theses and other research outputs. And so, we had to map our metadata and very thoroughly. So we did it in 2 stages. We did a big migration on February 2024, so this year. And then we did another round after students had deposited their theses just before graduation. So we had another wee chunk of most of their theses that we had to migrate over as well. So this involved mapping all the DC and Otago metadata fields to the Esploro fields, mapping asset, access and asset types. And for those of you who have been through this process, it sounds straightforward, but it really was not. 2 completely different systems. It was the fun times. We also had to create a new organisational structure to match the current university structure, so the departments, divisions, or the extra little departments involved in that. And we also had to load in our research details as well. So it was like kind of going back. We had the data, we had the information, but kind of going back to scratch again. So it all went really well, but it wasn't without its challenges, which we'll talk about shortly. But it really did remind us the importance of having standardised and descriptive metadata. And as we went through, realised that we've had quite a number of library staff involved in our archive in the past, and everybody has slightly different ways of doing things, and notes fields, etc., were interesting as we went along. So consistency within our library wasn't a strong point in some aspects, but we got there. So this is an example of some of the fields and mapping that we had to painstakingly develop, and so this was particularly relating to our theses, and this was really to ensure that the levels for our theses were mapped correctly, even though we had some very bespoke and DSpace, some more bespoke fields that we discovered along the way, and it was really important to make sure that our theses were actually mapped across properly and correctly, and had the embargo status and is not open, as you can see there, and happy to talk about that a little bit more later as well. We also very quickly learned that our library jargon doesn't necessarily match the product developers' IT jargon either, and so there were a few cross purposes and multiple times looking at the same thing, lots of eyes on this, trying to make sure that we were all on the same page and everybody understood what was meant by that. So we also had to establish the workflow. So whilst we were learning the new system and migrating all the content and checking that we'd done this all correctly, we're actually having to create new workflows and new processes for the new system. Mandy, bless her, created a lot of new training materials. We had to train. We've got our student admin staff who process theses, so they sit outside the library, the graduate research school, who also have control over the theses. We had to train them and have meetings with them. We trained various library staff, various admin staff. We also had to create deposit forms for theses, and lots of guides for staff and student users. So all whilst we were frantically learning the system ourselves, we were creating this documentation for others. We also had to configure the appearance and function of the system. So Otago underwent a rebrand, got a new name, a new logo, new colours. So we had to set those all up to go live on the same day, which it was fine, but our library systems colleagues were making sure that all of our library material was up with the new logos, etc. So we're a bit stressful on that particular day, but we got there. We also, all the emails that get sent out, you know, when people make deposits, etc., we had to configure a lot of emails within the system as well. And yes, we had to configure all the Otago degrees, past and present, had to be added, and the fields needed to be would display what was going to display when you go and actually look at a record. We had to tweak what they would look like too. So quite a lot of work. So communications, I had the pleasure of being the front face of our archive at various meetings. So we went around, I think about 15 meetings all up in the space of a couple of months. PVCs, DVCs meetings, HOD meetings, divisional meetings, library staff, other departments to promote our archive and keep everybody up to date about what we were doing. So a really good chance to promote our archive, to discover along the way that people didn't understand what an acronym was, what our archive was, in fact, what an institutional repository was, and some of them were surprised when I showed them that they actually had content in our repository. They didn't realise that they had put it there because they hadn't engaged with it at all, but Mandy and the library team would actually put collections in on their behalf as well. So a really good advertising opportunity for the library and our institutional repository. And we carried on adding new publications into our archive along the way. So how do we populate our archive? So we've talked a little bit about the migration already. So this is a really good infographic. We poached this from Esploro. So this is what we took out to departments and library staff just to explain what we were doing and how we were doing it. So first up, migrating our content. So obviously we talked about that. We mapped everything from DSpace into Esploro. We checked everything. We spent multiple hours with many people checking. I think we had a team of about, I think, 5 people checking. So yes, Richard, we did poach it. They allowed us to. Esploro got really great resources, and we, what part of the bonus of having multiple documentation and resources, we're allowed to basically attach our branding onto a lot of their content. So that was really helpful. So I say poach, but they let us. So migrating, we spend a lot of time checking, double checking. We obviously had a sandbox and we had various iterations, production site before going live. So we spent a lot of time testing, and we got non-library users to help us along with this migration as well. So we had IT support, business analyst, and infrastructure team as well. So we had a lot of people casting their eyes over it. And there's step 2, the smart expansion. And so Mandy undertook a smart expansion using content from our research outputs database, so our ROD database, because it's more comprehensive. So this is research outputs that we knew our Otago researchers have undertaken. So we grabbed a CSV file from there, and we managed to push in information into our archive that way. And so the point of doing a smart expansion is so that the system gets to know our Otago people, their name variants, what their discipline is. So then when we start going on to the harvesting process, it has an idea of who the system is looking for and makes some better matches. So we started off with research outputs that had a DOI, and then managed to push those in reasonably easily. So the smart expansion didn't come without its difficulties. If you were no longer a staff member, then you couldn't log in and upload because you weren't active. We did discover some errors in the source data from ROD. There were some DOIs that were wrongly attributed to a book chapter instead of a book, or vice versa. We had some issues with some conference abstracts being for the whole thing, not the individual one. And also some of the Scopus content can't be brought in. So while there are some permissions, it will say that an item exists, but we can't actually bring it in because we don't have the permissions from that particular publisher. So it wasn't perfect, but it was a really great way of bringing in a lot of content. So step 3, in August, Mandy ran a retrospective smart harvest, and so that was bringing in publications from this year. So we limited it to 2024. The system went out to search the Central Discovery Index, which draws from thousands of databases and different publishers to find our Otago researchers and their outputs. Because currently Otago has a policy of only Otago research output, so only when an academic is at Otago and produced research at Otago that content is allowed to go into our archive. So that's why we restricted the date to 2024, because if we went back further, the system would have just brought in absolutely everything from our current researchers, even if they hadn't actually produced it whilst they were here. So those conversations are ongoing. So interested to hear what other people are doing in that space, whether it's just their current staff content or whether it's from everything. So we did get quite a few results from added into our archive here. So we now started the ongoing Smart Harvest. So that runs daily at 8 AM. So that with the retrospective and the ongoing Smart Harvest, we've added another 2,300 publications to date. So that's only sort of from this year. So we're ticking away quite nicely, and Mandy's going to show you some graphs and a bit more information about that shortly. But yeah, so again, it looks all nice in this graphic, but it actually was a lot of work and nothing went quite as how we had planned. It's all good in the documents, and then when you actually start doing the processes, you find lots of little teething problems, etc. But we're just really pleased to have a lot of content already in the system compared to before. So a few more Smart Harvest difficulties. Disambiguation. So having an ORCID really helped to try and figure out who our target authors were. So we're again jumping on the ORCID bandwagon, trying to encourage as many of our academics to get an ORCID. So that really helped. And also having a clear discipline information so we can match a particular name with a particular discipline, a research area. Changing affiliations is challenging, and having multiple affiliations. So we obviously have a relationship with our medical school and the hospital. So the health sciences academics are slightly problematic. We often have people who are both joint clinical staff and university lecturing staff. So those joint affiliations prove problematic at the start. Also, the Otago researchers, we have an auto-loaded system that comes in with all of our university researchers, but it actually includes honorary researchers, external supervisors, teaching and professional practice fellows, and the latter who don't publish. And so when we get this, when the Smart Harvest goes out, it looks for some of these people. So we don't really want the external supervisors research in our system. So there's a bit of manual tweaking that has to happen behind the scenes. So the implementation, the good and the challenges. So the vendor liaison, we're really happy. We had Melanie, who was our go-to person, Ex Libris go-to person. She was the Director of Implementation Services. So she actually became a contact person. We're really lucky to have her. She was highly knowledgeable and very helpful. She actually came and visited. So part of the project, she came on site for 2 days, and we actually worked through some of the implementation setup. She helped us with configuring the system, creating the thesis deposit forms, and ironing out other various problems, and just having her face-to-face rather than on Zoom, and looking at the system at the same time was really helpful. So we're really grateful that we could bring her over here and she could give us a hand. That it had previous experience already shifting other library repositories from DSpace to Esploro, so they had an understanding already, which we were really grateful for. That had that previous experience with others. The project was well supported, so we had excellent university-wide team. We actually had proper resourcing, so we had a proper project team, which was not, we're used to having in-house projects, so it was really good to actually have an official team and people with specific skill sets rather than having a small project like we were normally used to in the library world. The implementation was super quick. It exceeded everybody's expectations about how we could implement this. We had some plans and then we're like, oh yeah, they will always get pushed out. We changed the go live date once by a couple of weeks just so that we could not go live at the same time that we expected theses. But apart from that, we adhered to our plans and we actually got it all done, and we went live successfully when we said that we were going to, which was the first. We came in under budget, so that wasn't a major aim or a concern, it was just a bonus, but it made our finance team and our sponsor happy that we've still come in under budget currently. And due to constraints in the system, so something that kind of went a little bit awry, but prompted a really great conversation was we had a talk with our graduate research school who had changed the rules a few years back about giving students, PhD masters students, a abstract only timeframe of 6 months. And the new system, this is actually quite problematic and took away a little bit of the automation. And so we had a conversation and said, well, actually 6 months is a bit of a challenge for students and maybe not such a good time frame. And admin staff, library staff frequently got emailed saying, can you lift the extension? Can you lift the extension? Can you change the extension and have another 6 months? And so we actually changed it we got it changed from 6 months to 12 months, which is good for admin staff, but also good for library staff, but also good for the students, because nobody can really publish in 6 months successfully, can they? So that was a bonus. The challenges, the sales pitch versus reality. Again, we needed a bit more a little bit more details on the functionality. The theses and the postgraduate students are not quite how we expected it to work. We didn't realise that the students are managed differently than the researchers. We can communicate in the system with the researchers, but we can't do that with the students. And we had to actually create specific deposit forms for them as well. So that was a bit of a challenge, and there's limited options. So the thesis side is underdeveloped, we think, but there's some good work and good progress being made in that space. So again, if anybody is ever thinking about changing systems or going through the RFP process, I think we would, in hindsight now, say have more time. I think we had a couple of meetings, some documentation and a 1 hour show and tell. So I think we need like a day-long show and tell. So we've learned some lessons along the way. Our vendor developers were based overseas, so some in Australia and some in Israel. So we had some challenges there with time zones, etc. So that proved a little bit difficult. Plus the odd language and jargon barrier, as mentioned earlier. And communicating our specific bespoke system and our needs. So we had made a few little tweaks to DSpace, and it was challenging to kind of communicate that to the vendors. Yes, and communicating to make sure that our embargoes, like I showed before, that our embargoes got stuck in the new system and they didn't end up being open. The mapping form and guidance, so we had this gigantic spreadsheet, and it was a bit of an initial trial and error with them not giving us very clear instructions or examples, and felt that we needed a wee bit more support there. We spent a lot of time having a lot of meetings about this, just to make sure that we got things right. So I think, in hindsight, we would have given ourselves a bit more time and got a bit more help in that space. But yeah, thanks to the team, we managed to complete that. And again, by working as we were going through the migration process and trying to find fixes and things that would work for migrating our content over, we were also mindful that we needed to think about how this would work when the system went live and we had a whole new deposits as well. So it wasn't just about migrating content, it was also considering what the new content being added in was going to look like and how that was going to work. And last but not least, mention statistics. So were very challenging for us. Again, the bespoke nature that Otago likes to do. We had a really hard time getting them out in a workable format and a decent format from DSpace. We weren't going to do it initially. It was flagged as being in the too hard basket, but then we started to receive complaints, mostly from postgraduate students that relied on their downloads and their hit stats for jobs and for publishing and other things. So we did embark on another conversation, and our wonderful infrastructure person managed to actually find a way of getting the statistics out and pushing them into Esploro. So whilst it was a challenge, it was also a win. And last up for me, the system. So we've received lots of positive feedback from our academics so far, that it's user-friendly, and they really like the ability to search and the ability to search within their department and within the collection. So that's fantastic news. Of course, the time-saving features, the smart harvest and expansion, it saved us admin time, and it's obviously saved the users time. In fact, actually, our users don't have to do anything at all. They just have to go in and check to make sure that we've got the research outputs in that is theirs and it's right, etc. So we're really asking people not to deposit things unless they really want to right now while we're working through our processes. We're trying to push as much content in as we possibly can. So this, the smart expansion harvest is going really well. And also for them, when they're filling in the manual deposits, if they put in a DOI, attach a PDF, and if the file upload, the system will go away and try and find as much of the information as possible. So it's not as manual as it had been in the past. We've now got an ORCID integration, which is fabulous. So again, we're just encouraging more of our researchers to sign up to the hub. A bonus, we've now got researcher profiles. We didn't really have them in the previous system. Again, we've received lots of great feedback. We haven't actually turned on the full functionality for these. We've just got a very basic version, but we do have the ability to turn on multiple tabs, including media mentions and some other details in the biographies. And I'll talk about the challenges of that in a minute. We can create help guide information, FAQs, information pages within the system. We don't have to create them outside and link people out and back. Again, we've actually got or made them all within the system, which is really helpful. Analytics, we haven't delved too far into this yet, but our previous reporting was actually quite minimal. So now we're looking forward to developing some better analytics and reports. And our library systems team have already got access and experience with using the Ex Libris analytics. So we're looking forward to working with them on that in that space. And of course, we now have interoperability with other university systems. So our research outputs database and our soon-to-be new grants database, we are working together on how those systems can talk to each other. So our academics just have to engage with one system, not all three. So our challenges mentioned before, the staff versus students. So the students, they have to, they don't get a profile page and they have to deposit through specific forms that we've had to create. So not so easy from our perspective. The system is very researcher focused. And the profile page is a great thing, but also the pages became too desirable. So we've fielded many a question, an email asking if our archive profile pages are replacing our Otago guides and replacing the departmental pages, etc. The answer to that was no, that was not the intention. The profiles were not actually in scope at all. It was just a bonus of the system. And yeah, they're really great. We've had lots of positive feedback and I started generating some conversations about where the profiles at Otago will go. So whilst it's been very time consuming and a slight distraction, it's also been good because it started some conversations happening. So the intricacies, like I said before, of the smart harvest and expansion, we're working through the processes, but again, not as straightforward as we had hoped. And added to the above, part of that is the ongoing maintenance. So we have to tweak and look at our organisational structure, our affiliated researchers, and merging the variant author names on a regular basis right now. It is becoming a little bit more of Mandy's business as usual, and I would like to say she's becoming quicker and more familiar with it, but it's still one of those things that, again, when you go from implementing a new system, this business as usual, just more tasks to do whilst working through things to be more efficient. And again, the support is based overseas, so that can be a challenge sometimes with timeframes, but on the whole, it has actually been, we think that the goods outweighed the bad. This is a way bigger improvement. And I'm going to pass over to Mandy to talk about some more specifics.
Thanks. Right, I'll might try and whiz through this because we've taken lots of your time. So yeah, what a difference a few months makes is the title, and it's pretty accurate. So we've been live for about 6 months now, just coming up on 6 months. We started with about 15,000 assets. That's what the system calls outputs. They're called assets. So if I use that, that's what I'm talking about. And now we have over 41,000. I checked before, it was 41,402, and we just add more and more each day. So there's been about 26,000 assets added since the May the 1st. And, we talked about one of the reasons our repository in DSpace was so small was because it didn't get used by our researchers. They weren't required to, and they didn't have time. We've always had a few enthusiasts who would add stuff, but by and large, our repository only grew because of the theses being deposited and because of the collection work. So when we do a project, we'd push a whole lot of outputs into our repository to showcase a group's work. And so these graphs can sort of show you that in DSpace, 2/3 of our repository was theses and the rest wasn't. and that these proportions have radically changed now. When I looked at the numbers, when I made this representation, there's 3 times as many non-theses as there are theses now, and vastly greater numbers. And just to sort of hit that home for another reason, I was looking at how many deposits in the past we'd had in a year period. So this was like October 2022 to 2023. We had 1,735 deposits made that weren't theses and into DSpace, and just 33 of these were done by researchers, and the rest was done by a librarian, and most of those were done by me for collection work. So that's how those deposits were occurring. And now currently in less than half that period of time, we've had 25,000 deposits. Most of this is the smart expansion. We've pushed in past research using the ROD database information, but also we've got over 2,000 come in through the smart harvest. We get about 60 harvested publications a week generally, from what I've seen. And also we've had 172 deposits by researchers, so they've been excited by the new system and decided to give it a go. So yeah, very different sort of situation now. Yeah, so with the functionality, we've pretty much researchers of the burden of having to deposit, and that's good because they just didn't do it. So now some people have already been poking around having a wee look, so I won't take too long. I'm just going to run you through some screenshots. I'm not going to do a live demo, just to highlight a few things. This is sort of the top of our homepage. We have key links to our academic divisions on the homepage, and we've got different search options. You can search for outputs, you can search for researchers, you can look at academic units or collections, and then further down the page we have our metrics, and at the top of the page we have our guides and our sort of our help tabs, and these we can create within Esploro and then locate them onto there, so it's all nice and within the system, which is really, really cool, and it's all customizable. So if I needed to quickly make a change, something somebody needed to know about, or a policy changed, I can just go in and edit, and bang, it's done. It's ready and available for people. If you run a search, I don't know how many people use Alma Primo, but the search results sort of look a wee bit like our library catalogue, which is run with Alma Primo. So this is sort of the kind of search results you'll see. There's various facets down the side, and we have a little bit of flexibility in what we can make facetable or filterable. Sorry if that's not a word. So we get to sort of pick and choose how things are going to look and what options are going to be there. And this is just an example of a publication record. It's nice and tidy. We customized what fields were going to be visible to display certain pieces of information. And they all look more or less like this. People can browse our university structure. So on the left there is our sort of academic unit structure, and it represents the university, and you can expand to see where different departments sit. And then on the right, if you want to go and just look at the publications that are affiliated with a specific department, you can just click on that department and you can see them, and it'll display just like the sort of search results from the previous slide. We do have the ability to have a homepage for each department with an image and some basic information, maybe some links out. We haven't actually done this yet, but we certainly can do that. And people can browse Otago researchers and view their profile pages, like this one from Haxby. These are, as Lisa said, they're not our official profile pages for Otago at this stage. And because of that, we allow them to customize some things, like adding a photo and adding their researcher IDs, but they don't have full ability to customize their homepage at this stage. And then on the outputs tab, you can go and see all their outputs and browse by the different type if you like, and also export them all out. We can create collections distinct from our university structure. So not with the departments, but create a special subset or group of publications so that it might, cut across departments and different researchers, so that under using a common theme or a project or a purpose, and put them into one sort of location, which then the researcher or the research group can use to be like, here, go and look at our publications for our project. And the collections are based on metadata criteria, and if I set the metadata criteria correctly, any new publications that get pulled in or added will automatically get added to the collection. We have the ability to feature 8 collections on our homepage, and then the rest are just linked off. You just click on collections and you'll see all of them like this. We currently have 16, including the Dunedin study publications. We've got some national science challenges, all sorts of things in there. And a collection page itself is quite simple. It's something we need to communicate with all our queries that come in. It's not a whole web page. It has limited functionality, but you have some text, you can have an image or a logo, and you can link out to things, and you can embed images if they're hosted elsewhere, and then it just lists your publications. Can't currently search within the collection for a publication, but that is coming. It'll be next year. It's in development. And so that's the front end, what anybody can see. That the administrators work in the back end, which is formerly known as the Research Hub, which I just call the back end really. And so this is where all the approvals are done, where jobs are run, where smart harvesting results are sort of checked and proved, and where we do everything to maintain the front system. This is the main screen. I have widgets set up so that I can sort of see things at a glance. Under the tasks on the sort of top leftish, I can see what deposits are sitting there to be processed. And yeah, you can make this as clean or as widgety as you like, but it can be quite useful just to be able to open it up and see what's sitting there. I can manage all our researchers, so this holds all the information about our Otago affiliated researchers, and they get added on an automated feed that comes in twice a day. So I'm not actually having to add people, it's being done for it, but I can make corrections if I need to. The system also holds information about non-affiliated researchers. So if anybody who is an author on a publication that is added to our archive will be classed as a researcher and have some very basic information, their name and usually their affiliation if it's on the publication. So there's like 93,000 researchers sitting in the system, which can be quite unwieldy when you're trying to make sure each person has just one person and not multiple. Administrators can do a mediated deposit on behalf of somebody else through the back end. So most researchers would deposit through the front end when they have that ability. If I'm adding something, I don't do that. I would do it through the back end. And again, that will still leverage the CDI. So I can put in the DOI or the title, and it will go out to the CDI and try and find it and then pull in all the metadata. So I don't have to enter it or enter very much. The Smart Harvest runs daily, we said, and it's going out and taking our affiliated researchers and looking for new publications for them. It sends me a report when it's done. It sort of looks a bit like this, which I can export out and get the actual details of it. So there's 2 stages to sort of working with a Smart Harvest. There's the match between the author of the publication and our Otago researcher. So we allow match on ID. So like if they've got an ORCID on the publication and an ORCID in our system, that's a match on ID. And also a very strong match, which is where pretty much all the details kind of line up. They get automatically approved, but I still go and check them. At least eyeball them. And if a match is not as strong as this, it will set them aside, and I go and manually review and approve or otherwise for those. And then there's the approval of the publication itself to be added. So we've got this set so that when an author match is approved, it will automatically add it. So that's a nice sort of flow on for certain asset types, because there are some assets that are a bit more complicated and messy. But everything else would get manually, needs manual approval. So I look at this manually review them on the task list and approve them as needed. Yeah, so that's sort of like in the task list sitting there going, you've got these things to look at. So it's quite nice and clear and straightforward. A review pane example kind of looks like this. So this is a strong match between, if we look at the bottom, between the author of the publication and our researcher. So the little bit on the left, that's the information that we have about our researchers. So this is their department and this is their name. And then on the other two columns are what the publication information is. And so, you know, we can see the name matches and the author affiliation is for the university. So this is a really good match and will get approved. And I can click on, there's the DOI URL there. I can click on that to open up the publication and just get clarification if I need to. They're obviously not all lovely and nice like this, but often they are, and it is pretty clear cut for me. So, okay, we are wrapping up the stages of the formal project. We're sort of in the last bits. We're still working on some processes of interoperability with PBRF and publications so that they can use our archive to find new publications, and we can get info from them about publications that aren't going to come in on the harvest, because it does get a lot of things, but it won't get everything. Things that are not well indexed, it's probably not going to have. So we're nearly at a business as usual state. We still have lots more past publications that we could add, and that's ongoing, and we're still, you know, promoting and sort of showcasing the system to our researchers, but it's becoming a bit more normal now. And so with that, we just wanted to recognise the project team for quite excellent work over a goodly amount of time, and also all our colleagues that sort of held down the fort while we were doing this. So they did all the other work and we could focus on this. Very happy to take any questions if there are any.
I've seen a few things pop up, a couple about the CDI. So the CDI is the Central Discovery Index, and it has the whole, so Ex Libris have created this particular CDI database where it goes out and it looks at multiple places. It's not just Clarivate sources. It does identify Scopus sources, and it will say that they exist, but it won't bring them in because they don't have permission to use Elsevier content. So it will tell us that it's there and try and get it from somewhere else. So yeah, it goes out to look at their particular database. So the Smart Harvest process goes away and looks at their various sources. I can't remember, we had an Excel spreadsheet, and I think there was Scopus, a ProQuest ebooks database, and something else that we're not part of that CDI at this point. So it is quite comprehensive. There was another question in there. So Rosetta, we are in the process of looking at implementing or basically pushing our theses into Rosetta, because it is an actual preservation system. So we're starting off with theses and then it may go from there. So Rosetta has been live, I think, for less than a month. So they're just trying to get their content in there first and sorted. So that is a project that we are looking at. Theses, the first cab off the rank. And sorry, I didn't see any other questions, so I have to go and have a look.
I can't really see.
That's okay. I have been keeping a note of some of the questions, other questions that are in the chat. So we've got one from Rudy Bin Mahi, who asked, will there be a plan or steps to manage mathematical and scientific characters in the item abstract metadata value fields, or will this still involve manual handling? So characters involving subscripts, superscripts, that sort of thing.
It does handle some stuff pretty well, not all the time. So I haven't sort of kept track of things, but it can actually do subscripts and super, you know, sub and super, and some Greek characters and bits and bobs. But I haven't really. I'm not quite sure how consistent it is. Sometimes I'll go in and just fix things. If I see something is, I'll go in and fix it. And because we do look at the harvesting and stuff every day, I usually can, yeah, it's not that hard to do it. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to see what the community group, because it has a really strong community group and we all feedback ideas and say, hey, how about this? And then they actually do implement them, which is pretty cool. So I'd have to go back and have a look and see what's been talked about previously. But by and large, it's a lot better than DSpace was, and but yeah, not never perfect, but pretty good.
I think there's an example there. I think the content that we migrated over from DSpace into Esploro didn't necessarily bring over the special characters. So we've made a point, it will handle umlauts and macrons and everything now, but we haven't gone retrospectively because this is too many. We were going to go and look at 15,000 results and see. But I mean, again, like Mandy said, if we notice something and if other people notice something, we'll jump in and fix them. But yeah, we're not going to retrospectively go and fix every little problem that we come and go looking for them at this point in time. So there's always future work to do.
Kim's got some questions. Is it cloud-based? It's software as a service. It's a SaaS. We don't have elements. We don't use elements, so I don't know about anything to do with elements. The old repository has been decommissioned because it was a security risk, and they were pretty prompt in doing that actually, which was rather scary.
We exported everything out that we possibly could though, so we have an archive file of things, just in case.
The researcher feed, so it goes to the university systems and it feeds in through AuthDB.
So we have an HR system, but we don't use the HR system. It goes to this AuthDB database, and so Esploro have a higher education platform that they use. So the AuthDB and the higher education platform talk to each other. I'm a very non-techie person, so I don't know how it works. They drew us some diagrams to explain it. We just thought they used HR data, but then we discovered that they have an AuthDB last year where they put all the student usernames and academics usernames, email addresses, etc. So they've got those two systems that talk to each other. So yeah, the feed, automatic feed of researchers. Yeah, we've got nothing to do with elements. They're all kind of within that system.
Yeah. So yeah, it's quite nice because it's hands off. I get some people going, oh, why am I not a researcher? I'm a staff member, but I'm not tagged as researcher. And actually I'm sort of like, well, it's not me. This is coming from the university as to what they classify you. And because it also feeds the Alma Primo, so the library catalogue and all the student stuff on there, anything to do with that, I kind of push back onto our library systems team because they're the experts in it. I'm just having a wee look at your other questions because there was a
well, just before you go on to those two, there's a couple that are a little bit further up. Both of them are from Dimity. They're asking, do you have any specific reporting to faculties or other areas of the uni on the metrics? And also, do you have a criteria for creating a collection? Just those before we move on to
we currently don't report, but that is in the works. So it has this whole other analytics system, which kind of sits adjacent to Esploro, so it's not within. I can look up some certain stuff, but the idea is definitely to create and be able to run reports for departments in the future, if that's not already being done by our publications separate team, because it's kind of, we sometimes cover similar space. And I've forgotten the second question.
The second question was, sorry, I'm just scrolling up through the chat. Do you have a criteria for creating a collection?
Criteria for collections? No, not really, because it's usually the researchers or a research group coming and saying, I really want to highlight my this set of work, and this has a common theme, and so we just work with them and do it. Often many of the publications are already in our archive, and it might be just adding a few more and then kind of grouping them all together and creating that collection. In the past, we would be starting almost from scratch, and so that would be quite a large amount of work, because we'd have to go and find all the meta. They may or may not have it. They may be like, here's the title, and if you're lucky, here's the DOI. And so I'd have to go and curate all that information and then upload it into DSpace. So now it's quite a lot easier. I can work with just a DOI if I have to, and get the system to do most of the work pulling it in itself. But we've also added quite a bit of past work as well. So two of the collections near the top, there was a couple small ones that I basically did off one or two emails within a couple of days of getting the request. So I don't think there's any limit on number of collections we can have, only the ones we can put on the homepage. So
we have put on pause one particular request from Health Sciences, and it's a collection within a collection within a collection within a collection, and it was too nuanced. So we said we could do a high level, but they wanted us to create like about 5 different tranches of a collection. It's like the system just can't handle that. It was basically trying to replicate their web pages. It's like, look, we can't do that kind of level of complicated collection right now, but we can do sort of more of a high level one. So we do have some vague criteria currently. It depends on how difficult and time consuming it is for us and for them to collate all of this, but it's really just constrained by the system at this point.
Yeah, there's not always, I think people have gotten quite excited, and some of our publications people have gotten excited and said, don't put your reports on a web page, put them in our archive, and they can do this. But the collection isn't a proper web page. It does have quite considerable constraints, so it's not capable of doing anything particularly fancy. It's for there to put a bit of information and then have your publications associated in that one location. It's not, you can't have multiple pages within a collection. So yes.
That's all right. Thank you for answering that for us. I think there is just one more question left in the chat with a whole 3 minutes left of the session, which is from Mel Chivers about the impact on the OA rates.
Don't know. Otago was really pretty high with our OA rates. I think Richard has done lots of little looks, and we're around the 70% mark. And because the system is fairly new, we haven't really gone out and sold green hard yet, and we still have no policy saying you must put your AAM like other institutions do. But I do. 175 deposits by researchers, I think I had, which is vastly more than we previously had. And I do know that a fair number of them were AAMs or, reports that aren't actually being published elsewhere. So I think it will help, and it is definitely in the cards to make people really aware and show them how to do that. And we did a wee talk for OA Week last week, just for our own institution, and one of those talks was Green OA with our archive, so showing them exactly how you would upload your AAM to our archive and make it open, and why you should.
During I call it the ROM, Research Outputs Management Project, was called ROM. We had a ROM roadshow when I was talking to the DVCs and the divisions, HODs, etc. And I did say that it would be great if you would put your AEMs in. And so that generated quite a bit of conversation of what does that mean? What is that? How do I find it? Where is it? And we've also started conversations with our information resources team and some cool contacts about publishers pushing their AAMs back to institutional repositories. So looking at how, I know that's happening a little bit overseas, how we could instigate that here. Like Mandy said, there is no mandate for AAMs here, but we're really keen to change our policy. So there's a bit of work in progress about updates to policy, and just generally engaging with academics and reminding them that, it's all well and good having a new system and making your research visible, but if they can't actually access it, then what's the point? So doing a bit of promo and new systems are a good excuse to remind people to publish open, and that, you know, the institutional repositories is a great way to do that. And they might be complying with MB along the way.
I just wanted to, Shona had a question saying, can some assets be closed or restricted, or is everything open? We have full flexibility. So what you don't see in the front portal is all the theses that are under an endorsed embargo, where their even existence is not allowed to be made public. So they're in the system, but they can't be seen, and they will open automatically when their embargo expires. All the theses, they have their thesis PDF there. What you don't see is the author declaration that's also sitting in there, but it's all suppressed. So we have quite good flexibility. We have things opening automatically, which in the last system we had to manually open things up for some types of embargo. Do you assign DOIs? Not yet. It's in the works. We have handles happening, but we can switch it to be DOI, but we have to just set up the the DOI provider, what thing they call it, and that hasn't happened. Is there a limit to the amount of storage? I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is. I don't think we're going to get there for a wee while, but
I think the discussion, obviously this is an institutional repository, it's not a data repository, so people have been asking, we've had those conversations, if we were going to turn this ever into a data repository, then I think we would need more storage. But currently, I think, yeah, there's plenty of space available for what we need it for.
What we do, it does look like we have data sets in there, but they're metadata records. So they're a record of the data set that links out to where they might be located, which might be Figshare or wherever. And that harvesting is happening. I was really surprised. It just happens. So all of a sudden we have now data sets and chemical structures and things that are being published.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for all of your hard mahi. It's really, really cool to see something so interesting and so like game changing, I think, a little bit for a lot of academic institutions.
Game changing for us.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for coming along, everybody. Ka kite for now, and hopefully we'll see you all back again for the rest of the seminar tomorrow. Again, a huge big thanks to our hosts, Lisa and Mandy, and I'm sure that they'll be open for any questions via the standard email communications and that sort of thing. So if you have anything else to ask them, please do so. Aside from that, it has been a pleasure to have you with us today, and I guess we'll see you next time. Ka kite for now.